You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome inside another crossover edition. Locked On Packers, Locked On Vikings. Luke Braun with Locked On Vikings. I'm Peter Bukowski with Locked On Packers. An NFC North showdown with incredibly important NFC playoff implications, which means we are going to have an absolute blast on today's show, which is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, and you're right about them scoring more or less, you can win up to 10 times your money. First-time users can get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's Prize Picks with the promo code Locked On. Luke, this is the second time we get to do this. We haven't talked. This is, I think, probably the longest I've ever gone between crossovers. In week 1 to week 17 seems absolutely bonkers, but here we are. The Vikings keep winning inexplicably, and the Packers now have a chance to keep their playoff hopes alive with a win. What is the thing that you are monitoring right now? The biggest story in Vikings land?
Yeah, well, we gotta have the fraud talk. I think you and I today. I think we got to do that right now, though. So the spread's what, like 3.5, 4, depending on where.
Yeah, depending on where you look.
Opened at 4 for the Packers. The Vikings aren't going to play everybody. That's, I think, I know you were going through a whole thing like trying to figure out what, or trying to explain no, the spread is right. They might have Justin Jefferson on a pitch count if he'll let them. That's also been a thing. He kind of says no and just goes out there anyways. But they've already got guys like Harrison Smith, Eric Kendricks on pitch counts, defensive line rotating a lot more. So they're kind of in preseason. They're not full resting, getting, just full on, Nick Mullins going in or anything like that, but they're trying to keep people healthy and keep people rested.
And Kevin O'Connell was upfront about this, right? Said, this is what we're going to do.
He's been saying this for 2 weeks, and they've been doing it for 2 weeks here. So that's, I think part of it is that you might not see everybody. But still, I hope that doesn't ruin, the Super Bowl for you. Cause
it's so funny because every time over the last 5 or so years, if the Vikings beat the Packers, it is the biggest story in Minnesota sports for 6 months. And it's very much like the Don Draper scene where it's I feel sorry for you, and it's I don't think about you at all. I think
you
it's
cannot
much
say that after the 2 days you have had on Twitter, man.
No. So I also happen to breaking down the team that I cover against the opponent that they are facing, and so it's a little different this week. Now, I have been saying for many weeks that the Vikings are frauds, right? You know this. Your listeners know this. Your followers on Twitter certainly know this. And so, yeah, that's how I feel. I spent 9.5 minutes on it yesterday on the show, so we don't need to totally rehash it, but it's going to be fascinating to see. So if the 2019 team is the one that comes up a lot, right? The Packers and the Vikings were better by DVOA and EPA and all these stats that I'm bringing up now. And it was a popular thing to say among Vikings fans and Vikings Twitter to say, yeah, but the Vikings are better, and we hope we see you in the playoffs. It's interesting that the roles are reversed right now, and that the Packers beat that Vikings team twice, and DVOA still said the Vikings were the better team. That very well could be how this all plays out. And I've said that it's fine if the Vikings win. I'm still going to continue to die on this hill that the underlying metrics say the Vikings are not as good. So before we dive into the matchups or anything like that, can you explain to me why, if you just looked at things that we tend to use as measures of quality for teams, do not, by and large, reflect the actual number of wins and losses that this team has? What is the explanation for that?
Yeah, so I think the explanation is, I think you've got a misconception of what the regression should look like. And I wrote a whole article on Zone Coverage about this, about regression and what is regression supposed to look like. I think in the first 6 weeks, yeah, they played some crappy teams pretty crappily, and they were still getting used to the scheme and, new head coach and stuff, still kind of getting things under their belt, not unlike the 2019 Packers.
Right.
And then after the
same
bye,
offense even.
And they like got really lucky in those games with weird ref calls and stuff, some turnover things. And then in after the bye, they had clearly pulled things together, and I think their luck evened out. But if you look at like what regression is supposed to look like, Peter, regression already happened. Their luck has regressed. They are totally back to average in luck. And if you look at like the metrics, I don't know, red zone or turnover luck or whatever, it's going to look like they're above average if you add up the whole season, because they had a bunch of lucky games and then a bunch of average games. But regression is not, they had lucky games, now they need unlucky games. It's that luck will constantly be average. And over the last 9 games, they've had unlucky breaks as much as they've had lucky breaks the last 9 games after the bye. And they've still been able to hang with, if not beat, teams like the Bills. One of the biggest things, they've got like a win's worth of win probability out of that Bills game, because they had like a 75% win probability move on one fumble. And that like explains like most of it. So I think if you're going to look at these analytics, you can't just look at like, here they are in DVOA. They're the 17th best team by DVOA. So they're the 17th best team. I don't think like Aaron Schatz would tell you that that's a good idea. He invented it. Like, I think even he would tell you, you have to look a little bit more at the how and the why. And you can do that statistically. You can do that on tape. And that's kind of 2 different languages to go. But the Vikings have gotten better over the season. Way different team than the one that you guys played. And I would hope for your sake that you're a different team than the one that we played week 1, because that was a catastrophe for you guys. And that like they've gotten a lot
blowing
better
some coverages to be sure.
Well, that makes 2 of us. But like their over the season totals are probably not the most representative of the team you're getting right now, if you're still including stuff that happened week 3 when they were just like way less comfortable in the scheme and all that. And then the only other thing I would bring up is the situational masters thing, which is a huge Kevin O'Connell emphasis of being good at situational football. You see things like Mark Ingram going out of bounds on Monday Night Football when he's not supposed to. That kind of stuff. The Vikings are very good at avoiding that. They're very good at avoiding penalties. They're very good at all these other things on the margins that tend to add up over time and don't get caught.
Why don't those things matter in the first quarter and the second quarter and the third quarter? Why do they only manifest
situation
in the fourth quarter? Because those situations
they matter
are
when the clock's
in the first quarter.
When the clock matters. They matter when the clock matters.
No, they matter
in the first quarter.
But a touchdown in the first quarter counts as 7, just like it does in the fourth quarter. Like if you're a good situational team, you should be good first quarter, second quarter, third quarter too, not just good in the fourth quarter. Like the thing about those Patriots teams that were truly situational masters is they did it all the time, not just in the fourth quarter. And the Vikings don't do that.
Do you know what situational football is? It's the fourth quarter. It's clock management.
But we're not talking about just the fourth quarter. Situational football is red zone. Situational football is third down. Situational
they're great in the red zone.
They're
amazing. And they're like the 4th best red zone team in the
just
league.
The fourth quarter.
Yeah, they're great in the red zone. They're great on third downs. I think they generate like the 5th most first downs in the league. And I if you look at the end of these games,
they're a mediocre offense on third down, or mediocre defense on third down. They're a very good offense in the red zone.
If you look at the way that they've navigated these end game situations, especially, but I mean, I don't know. I think I saw you post that you think red zone is luck too. So I don't know where we're at on
no, red zone is noise.
Okay.
It's small sample size theater.
I mean, we're already in small sample size theater. If you want to project a regression,
I'm saying the red zone,
4 games left. There's a maximum 6 games left.
Red zone performance is highly variable. Like the Packers were all-time great in 2020, and with the same coaches and the same players in 2021, they were below average. Like it's a small sample size problem. Like projecting good red zone efficiency is really hard because it can be so noisy. It's
and why are you projecting it so hard?
I'm not. I'm telling you, it's not reliable week over week.
No, yeah, nobody's saying it's reliable. I think most people understand.
No, but you're arguing that they're good situationally, and I'm telling you that those situations, that's just noise.
So are you saying you just can't?
I'm saying they're not. I'm saying they've been good.
To be a good,
but that's if it's not reliable, if it's not projectable, then it doesn't really matter.
Okay, let's pull this back then. So let's say the Vikings get average luck, and they're average in all these unsustainable things. And I get it. Red zone is. You can be good in the red zone, and then it's hard to do a good thing in the red zone in the future, but they should still get credit for doing good things in the red zone.
Sure.
But let's say the Vikings get average. What do you think their record should be? What do you think? They're 12-3. What do you think it should be? A 5-win team, 10-win team, 2-win team? What are we talking about?
The formulas that we use to predict these, to assess these things, say that they should be like estimated wins by Football Outsiders say they should be a 6-win team. Now, I don't think they should be a 6-win team, but I certainly don't think they look like a 12-win team. Like, so
Nobody
here's
does.
if you go back,
12. What are we talking?
But so I'm going to answer your question. The Packers with Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy in, I think it is 7 out of 9 seasons, outperformed their estimated wins. I think a good coach and a good quarterback are worth an extra win and a half or 2 based on what we tend to look at, and that tells us team quality. So if you're supposed to be a 10 or 11 win team and you win 12 or 13 games, this is exactly what happened with the Packers in 2019. They were probably a 10 win team, but Aaron Rodgers pulled 3 games out of thin air and they became a 13 win team.
Isn't that the quarterback playing well?
I'm sorry?
Isn't that the quarterback playing well, though? I mean, we've had 4-7 quarter comebacks.
No,
that's the quarterback doing good stuff.
But so my point is, you look at every other team that has 10 wins in the league right now. All of them, 10 or more, all of them have 10 or more estimated wins. So all of their underlying metrics say they are good. So are Kirk Cousins and Kevin O'Connell being so much better than those teams that they are pulling up so much more of this weight? I just don't see that as being the case. That seems crazy to me.
Most Vikings fans would probably agree that like the 49ers, Cowboys, and Eagles are better if you just want to stick to the NFC. They've proven that they can do something like go into Buffalo and win a game, or if you want to say they got lucky, go toe to toe. But I think saying like 6 wins is just way overcorrecting for stuff that is ultimately on the margins of a game, like red zone, third down and stuff. Like that is part of it, but a lot more of the meat of it in terms of generating first downs has been a little bit more consistent. The Vikings are really bursty, and I think it creates these sort of, you fall behind 33, you score 33 kind of deals. And I think it muddies a lot of that stuff. And I will say, well, go ahead.
Well, what I was gonna say is, if the Vikings are a good team, why historically have all the good teams looked statistically like not the Vikings? Why are they?
That's why I'm asking you, how
outliers?
good do you think the Vikings are? Because nobody's saying they're actually as good as all the 12 win teams.
I think they're in that like 7 to 9 win range as of this
7 to 9. So you think they've won like 5 games that they shouldn't have won?
I don't think they've won 5 games that they shouldn't have won. I think I'm not going to go through and say, okay, they should have. Obviously the Colts game, they should have lost. Every team ever that has been in that position, they lost that game.
So they do something nobody's ever done before, and because nobody's ever done before, you think that it doesn't, like, it shouldn't count.
By
they shouldn't get credit for doing something that has never happened before.
I'm saying historically wildly unlikely for them to have won that game. So I'm saying that win counts in the standings, of course, but in terms of win quality,
I'll also say that might be
talking about an all-time outlier. So this is interesting. So someone suggested that 50-50 games they've won 11 if close games are coin flips,
which is a really bad way to look at it, by the way.
But let's just say that
2 8-pointers, a couple 7-pointers. They had over 60% in the last drive in like all of those games, like over 60% win probability.
For sake of argument that that's the case. It's about 0.05% chance that they would win all these games. Well, they've already set an NFL record for close game wins, right? Mm-hmm. They've done something no other team has done ever. And one of those wins is a comeback that no other team had ever done ever. So if we're talking about historical outliers, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that they would have a historical outlier performance above their team quality. Yeah, I think
they are an outlier. Absolutely. Right. I don't think that's a bad thing. They just are an outlier.
Like if they're a 9-win team, is that much worse than what they are now? Like we'd be saying that they're probably the 4th or 5th best team in the NFC. Like, I don't think that's crazy. I think that's fine.
I would have said 10-win team. So we're 1 win off, and maybe we don't need to fight that hard about it.
No, I mean, look, I think if you, again, I believe in all of the numbers that I have cited. I am consistent on this. I've talked about this with the Packers for years. So it's not like I'm making up new numbers to try and justify my position on this. I believe in point differential. I believe in DVOA and EPA and all those numbers that say the Vikings are a mediocre team. So I think they would be, I mean, they're a mediocre team. That's what I think.
So do you believe, so you like, if there is an outlier, that probably shouldn't be treated as the middle of the bell curve, right? Like that shouldn't be the thing. Okay. So all of those metrics are skewed insanely by the one Cowboys game. That's an outlier. That one's not the bell curve, and it's probably overrepresented in all of those stats.
Well, but they also got beat handily by the Eagles.
I think then they're a different team than that. We kind of already talked about that with those are the two games. The Lions game, that was a pretty bad game, but I think that was fair enough, and the Lions deserve a lot of credit for that one too. And then that's it. That's the 3 losses. That's it.
But again, they lost 3 games by double digits. Like why if they're good, why are they not doing what every other good team does? I guess that's the question. Every other good team that we've ever seen that has been as good as this Vikings team is at winning games has won in a different kind of way. So
why is a great argument to treat them like a 10-win team instead of a 12-win team. But if you want to go to 8 or 7 or something like that, I think you have to work a little bit harder than other teams are a little better with this.
But other teams are like
if you want to take a third of or
a lot
like
better,
5 of 12 wins away, you're almost taking half the wins away. You have to go so much harder than historically other teams with this record have had better DVOA.
But they also had better point differentials. They had better EPA per play. They had better there's a mountain of data that says that they're not even close to a 12-win team.
That's the same information presented in 3 different ways. It's all basically stuff that is trained on how many yards a certain play got and trying to be like smart and contextual about it.
Okay, so wins is the only thing that matters then. I guess that's where we landed. That's fine.
That's not where we landed at all. But
let's talk about the matchups.
What I will say. There are specific things that they have done, I think, to be better in the very historically wonky area of when there's a 3-point differential in a game. And those things have been repeated all year. But the other thing is they're out of time for regression to hit. Like, regression is what happens when you win 10 coin flips in a row and then you flip a coin 100 more times. Eventually the luck evens out and those first 10 wins are washed away. That's what regression is. There's only 2 regular season games left. And then if they lose one, it's over. So regression is kind of out of time to hit. And you're going to get in, like, once you're in the playoffs, you get into a single game sample, and those sorts of overall average weird things don't count. You could go get somebody on a bad day because they drank too much the night before, and suddenly, you're the Bills in the 90s. But yeah, we have to get to matchups and everything else.
It's less about, to me, it's less about regression and more about trying to assess the actual quality of this team. And so if we're trying to say, okay, what happens in the playoffs, because they're going to the playoffs, we know that they're going to be underdogs in a lot of those games against any of the teams above them. Like, they won't be against the Commanders at home, probably, right? In a 3-6, if that's what it ends up being, or in a 2-7 against the Lions, they'll be favored at home.
It would be, which is the biggest bummer here is if you guys beat us in this game, like, you have to make playoffs.
The 2 seed is out, basically.
Then you're getting San Francisco probably. Yeah. So we can't have the rematch,
And there are a lot of Packer fans that I'm just good on that then. Like, I'd rather not make the playoffs than get our asses kicked by the 49ers again. There's a lot of Packer fans that feel that way. All right.
It's a little sore. We got so much other stuff.
So many other things to talk about.
Yeah.
This episode brought to you by Audible. Audible is releasing a slate of new football podcasts that we're sure you're going to love. That's why you'll be able to find an episode from the league available as bonus episodes on Locked On NFL, narrated by Super Bowl champion and legendary smack talker Richard Sherman and sports broadcaster Taylor Rooks. The League is an 8-part docuseries about the most bizarre, inspirational, and unlikely stories in America's favorite sport, pro football. You don't want to miss these untold stories spanning from the 1940s through the present. Our bonus episode is called The Way of the Cowboy, and the incredible story of the 1977 Dallas Cowboys brought in Bruce Lee's protege to teach their defense martial arts, ushering in a new approach to ways the league trained. Head over to Locked On NFL for a bonus episode of The League, or catch the full series wherever you get your podcasts available now. Audible, get in the game. And thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen every day. Make sure you check out Locked On Sports today. If you're a Vikings fan, you may have already heard a version of Locked On Sports Today in your feed and been going, what is this? Why do I hear Peter Bukowski's voice in my feed? I get it. The biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reaction, game recaps, and Locked On's take of the day. Locked On Sports Today, available on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. I can't wait until that whole A block is clipped for Locked On Social. All right, Luke, let's talk about the actual matchups in this game rather than
Sure.
trying to adjudicate the quality of the Minnesota Vikings.
Sure. How do you feel about Justin Jefferson versus Eric Stokes again? Is that going to go better this time?
Well, Eric Stokes is on IR, so that's not going to happen.
I didn't even know that.
But
Who is it then?
It'll be Russell Douglas.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's about the same.
And so, well, it's interesting. That, of course, is going to be the thing that we're focused on in this one, right? So Jair Alexander wanted to travel in week 1. The Packers didn't let him do that. They haven't really let him do that over the course of the season. They've done it a little bit. They let him do it a little bit with Terry McLaurin. I just don't think like this Vikings offense is the team to do that with. Although maybe on third down, if Keyshawn Nixon can't go and Justin Jefferson's going to play in the slot, maybe you see it a little bit more. If you're thinking about that from this perspective, how do you want to see the Packers defend the Vikings?
I think the thing I'd least want to see is Jair Alexander traveling with Justin Jefferson. I think I'd be pretty happy to not see that. I mean, I certainly was happy with it week 1. I don't know. I mean, it's so tough because the last time these two teams played, the Packers just like didn't cover anybody because they kept busting. So it's like, I guess if you can improve on that, your odds will be a little better. But like, yeah.
But other than that, the play was pretty good.
How else was the play, Mrs. Lincoln?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that would be the thing I would least like to see. But Jefferson has seen a lot of capping with safeties and a lot of, press underneath and trailing with something like poaching or something like that. And that's been the kind of way, like he's just functionally doubled all the time. And then it comes down to, can KJ Osborne do stuff? Can TJ Hawkinson do stuff? He's over here now.
Or he just catches a touchdown against brackets against the Giants because he's just really good.
Yes, that was completely insane. So he'll get his, like, there's just at a certain point, only so much you can do there. But hey, Lambeau cold, going to be a little harder to throw. Maybe this will be more of a run game kind of thing, which is, I guess, the question I want to flip to you then. If the Vikings are going to go with the zone run thing, I mean, this Dalvin Cook zone run game, different than it was like in the 2020 game when they got 4 touchdowns and all of that stuff, but still very much the same DNA. Is that something you feel any bit better about the Packers defending?
They didn't defend it poorly in the first game. In the second half, the Vikings went to the run game a little bit more and got it going a little bit in a game where the Packers offense was just like not generating points, not generating first downs. And I think the fatigue of the game set in for them a little bit. That was the story of really their first 6 or 7 weeks. They defended Miami really well in the run game in the second half. And in fact, really starting after the first quarter, they gave up a couple explosive runs to start. And then they said, okay, if you're going to run all this wide zone, like here's the 6-1 that has just sort of been the panacea to stopping these wide zone runs. You have to come up with something else. I was going to ask you, interestingly, why this Vikings run game hasn't been as potent as we've seen it in years past.
They just don't care about it.
So if they're just going to be like, okay, yeah, here's all of the Justin Jefferson stuff and Adam Thielen stuff and let Kirk Cousins go cook, then
they're running like just enough to justify their play actions, and that's kind of it. Like it's so different than
which is probably the way
wanted to.
It's probably the way to do it, by the way. If the Packers
like
could do that,
the neutral pass rate or something like that, it's just who they are. They're a McVay team. It's just kind of who they are.
And Mike Zimmer is probably watching it and punching air, going, "Come on, they're not running the ball enough." And Vikings fans
he's
are
chilling
like,
with Dion.
Thank God that they're finally passing this much. I'm interested to see how much the Packers care, knowing that the Vikings don't care as much. Right.
Yeah.
And so
if you want to like split, like go single high and load the box, that's a dream for the Vikings.
Yeah. And like the Packers didn't do that in week 1. They played a lot.
I don't think they should this time.
They played a lot of too high. Now they live in too high pre-snap, and then they're going to decide, okay, are we going to spin? Or are we not? Are we going to play 4? Are we going to play 2? Are we going to play 6? They did some interesting things, mixing coverages in the second half against Tua, but they didn't do anything that tricky. Like it wasn't like they were, doing some crazy disguises and double A gap mugs and fire zones and simulated pressures. Like, no, it was just 4-man rushes and they were winning. Now the Dolphins offensive line is worse than the Vikings offensive line. It sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, based on the practice reports, that this is going to be a pretty healthy Vikings offensive line. Yes.
They're missing their center. Probably. He's got a back thing. Garrett Bradbury is out. So it's Austin Schlottman, who has been a backup.
Well, Kenny Clark has already
Speaking of matchups, that's the one that I was going to say.
Yeah, Garrett Bradbury already needs to send Father's Day cards to Kenny Clark every year, so like that's just part of the deal. But Preston Smith has been really good. He was really impactful last week. Kingsley Enagbare, the rookie, has been
Does he
really
come off
good.
the edge mostly?
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy, Christian Darrisaw has been a revelation. That is going to be a fun.
He's been so good. He's been really, really good. And Preston Smith has gotten some good offensive linemen this year, which has really been interesting to see. We'll see if the Packers decide to blitz Kirk Cousins or just like force Kirk to read everything out and make the right plays. He made some great plays in week 1 under pressure, right? Like that was part of the deal. That the touchdown was an incredible play by Kirk. Like he created some time with a guy in his face, pressure, and throws to Justin Jefferson, who happens to be wide open. But he doesn't get to Justin Jefferson if the pressure gets home. It didn't. He escaped it, and he makes a nice throw. So he has played incredible football against the Packers. That's been like the most frustrating thing for Packers fans is watching him have his best games.
Best games, yeah.
In the face
second one he played
moments.
as a Viking in Lambeau, the tie might still be his best game as a Viking.
He was unbelievable in that game. Now, the only bad one was the one where, coincidentally, Zadarius Smith was unblockable on Monday night in Minnesota to steal the division. That was the game where all the Vikings fans were saying, look at DVOA, we're better. And then the Packers won that game pretty comfortably. So what I said was the Packers will win if they protect Rodgers. If the blocking is good, I think they'll be able to get enough against this defense to win. Week 1, the offense was scuttled by pressure. Zadarius Smith was a world beater. And so David Bakhtiari practiced on Wednesday. Josh Nijman, who had a shoulder injury against the Dolphins, also practiced on Wednesday. And Zach Tom has acquitted himself. He's the best pass blocking rookie in this rookie class. And so I think they're in a good position to do that. Then it's, can they play complementary football? Do they have answers for Justin Jefferson? But the Packers, if they let pressure affect the game offensively from the offensive standpoint, I don't think they will win. If they don't, I think they'll win. Like, I think that really is, for me, how simple the game is right now. Is there something that you see as similarly important for the Vikings?
I was going to say getting pressure on Rodgers. The other thing, so I saw Rodgers wasn't practicing with a knee injury. It sounds like he's still going to go there.
That's just maintenance. That's just old guy maintenance. He's going to be fine. I mean, whether he'll be limited, we'll see. He didn't look limited on that throw to Mercedes Lewis, escaping pressure to his left against the Dolphins on Sunday. But yeah, you never want to see him just mysteriously pop up on the injury report.
Right. Like one of those where you wake up and it hurts worse than it did in the day. I would say it's the same thing. I think Zadarius Smith rushing inside, and you know how he loves to do, get him one-on-one with the guard, that kind of thing, is going to be a big deal. And Zach Tom, he's right tackle, right?
Well, he's played multiple positions so far. He was playing left tackle for David Bakhtiari, and then he was playing right tackle for Josh Nijman at times. So he's been moving around, which is actually pretty impressive for the rookie. He played left guard in that week 1 game where the Packers had a bunch of injuries and they were playing a bunch of backups in that game anyway. Jake Hansen, who started at right guard in that game, is on IR, but also was deeply buried on the bench. Royce Newman, who was playing right tackle in that game, was moved to right guard, then lost that job. So if Josh Nijman can go, he won't be on the field. So this offensive line will be much better than it was in that week 1 matchup. We'll see if that actually plays itself out in an important and meaningful way. And let's get to some predictions here. I have a feeling where this is going to go, but let's have some fun anyway.
I don't know. I don't know who plays.
That's part of the reason that this is all difficult. BetOnline, if you want to have some money on it, which maybe Luke and I can have.
If you feel super strongly, that's what
we can have some side money on it. Maybe Luke, get the latest odds and we should do it at BetOnline first, and then maybe have some more on the side. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball World Cup. We've got it all at BetOnline.net. If you love sports, you will love BetOnline. It's the fastest and easiest way to get all your betting info. Head to the website or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. And did you know that driving high is considered driving under the influence? Mm-hmm. That driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even in states where marijuana is legal. That means driving high could get you a DUI. And if you think law enforcement officers can't tell when you're driving high, you're wrong. Your friends can tell, your coworkers can tell, even your parents can tell, maybe especially your parents can tell. So what you think that law enforcement officers don't know when you're driving high, why would you think that? Driving under the influence of marijuana can slow your release time, response time, and change how you perceive time and speed. So even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, you're not. Because the bottom line is, if you feel different, you drive different. And driving high is driving under the influence. So remember, drive high, get a DUI, paid for by NHTSA. And one more time, Luke, let me shamelessly plug Locked On Sports today. Make it your second listen. We bring you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with our local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports today, available on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. Okay, I've seen this line 3.5. As you said, we don't know who's going to play. We don't know how much they're going to play
right now. And
3.5 on BetOnline as we record this. And the last time I checked, money was pretty evenly split too. So that's an interesting
slightly
factor.
on the Vikings, but yeah, it'll go up and down.
I think this game, as I said, I think it's a game between two teams that are relatively even. How much the Vikings want to care? Like I meant to ask you this, but we got a little carried away. Was how much you think the Vikings should care about a game like this?
I'm so torn on this. So on one hand, I get it. Like they are prioritizing health and kind of freshness over the difference between the 2 or the 3 seed, because ultimately for that to come up, the 49ers have to win out, and both the Vikings and 49ers have to see their have to win their wild card games. That's a 4-game parlay for this to even matter.
Right.
So yeah, that like, and I think that's,
we'll see what BetOnline would give us odds on that for.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So it's like, but if it does matter, that would certainly matter, right? Home field advantage up against San Francisco. That's a tough team. You want to get him to US Bank where it's loud. Brock Purdy, make him play on the road. So I get it. But at the same time, it's like, is that more important than, what if you run everybody to the ground and guys like Harrison Smith or Eric Kendricks or Danielle Hunter that have played like every rep this season? That Colts game, it was like 115 reps. Like it was insane. Or I think 93 was the actual number on defense. 93 reps in a game. That's unbelievable.
That's a game and a half. That's almost 2 games.
It's unbelievable. And so that wear and tear is like, okay, maybe those guys being fresh so we can actually win these playoff games rather than, worrying about where we end up in the standings. I'm super, super torn on it. I think I lean toward where Kevin O'Connell is, where, give him some rest. And he is sort of half playing it. Like they'll play a little, they'll rotate out, trying to get some young guys some run. We're seeing a lot more Brian Asamoah, Sezia Tomoa, these draft pick guys that have kind of been on the bench all year, getting a little bit more run. But I think all of that said, I have been taking Vikings overs for weeks and they always hit. So if I'm going to be anything like confident in anything, it's over 47.5, 3.5 points on the road, division. No idea who's going to play. That's one where I'm not going to put any money anywhere on that. I have no idea how that's going to play out, but I'd be surprised if there wasn't a bunch of scoring.
Yeah. The over to me is a lock. I know it's going to be cold, but I just think there's going to be a lot of scoring. And if you look at it, the Packers against the best defenses they've faced, that's actually when they've been at their best, interestingly. And so, the Cowboys,
this is the second worst
on the Cowboys. They hung 30 on the Eagles. And even I know Aaron Donald didn't play, but that's still a pretty good Rams defense. And they really, they kneeled at the 1-yard line. They could have sleptwalked to 30 points if they wanted to in that game. So I think there's going to be points. I think the Packers win. I think the Packers cover. And I don't think the Vikings care that much. I think that's part of the deal. And so
speaking of the Don Draper meme.
Yeah. So, a lot more to come. I'm going to be live after the game. Are you going to do a live stream after the game?
I will be live a few hours after the game. I have a conflict, so I'll be
fine.
With
check out Locked On Vikings after the game. Check out Locked On Packers after the game. We always get Vikings fans on our streams. So if you want to come stop by, welcome. We'll have some fun. I had fun with this, Luke.
This is fun. It's all good fun.
I always have fun talking to you.
Banger crossover.
I always have fun on Twitter with you. And so that's part of why I love to do these crossovers. We will talk to you all again very soon.